I line itemed it so you can. No problem. Of course. Who here has not signed this? It's we're gonna be filming.
I signed it with Ryder.
So. Right.
Oh, good.
Nice.
Oh, hey, you know what? That makes sense.
God bless.
All right, we'll see. We'll figure it out.
Get out of here.
I gotta see it.
Sorry, I was in the middle of blowing my nose and coughing down.
Hey, is there a sound system hooked up to this stuff too?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we're just good. So if I went, I still hear it on the computer though. I don't hear it on the street.
It should go right up. Do me a favor. Can you just run a test really quickly?
On HDMI, the audio should be controlled.
Over here. Okay.
I would replug it. It doesn't sound like the audio is going through.
Sure. Try it one more time.
You know you have an HDMI
Where's the
direct, right?
camera?
Where? On this side?
Yeah,
All right. Thank you.
that might be better.
Oh, you do have direct.
Oh,
Oh.
This
I only saw that
That's
from
it.
here because I had the right point of
All right. Thank you. Nice. Thank you, sir.
Still, you might be.
No.
Yes, still. The audio's not going through the wall.
Let me try.
It's not that big of a deal.
No, but
Yeah, it'd be nice.
Yeah.
But
No, I thought that was free.
you mind if I grab that really quick?
sure.
Thanks.
The world was stunned today when the desert Diego Ricardo, the youngest person on the planet. Diego was stabbed outside of Florence when firing.
Children of men.
Nice.
Okay. I love children of men.
Maybe it's because I'm live streaming.
Oh, that might be.
Can I send you a link and just post something for
Yeah.
you? Real quick?
Absolutely.
It's like the freshest,
Do me a favor, send it to my Gmail account,
Sure.
which is just steele.filipek@gmail.com.
Because he was a celebrity and he was partying.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, something like that.
All right. Steele. Filipek. How do you spell that again?
Filipek. Gmail.com.
Cool. One person should have.
Hey, Jeremy. We'll chat. At the end of after this presentation, I'm speaking to everybody individually. I'm going to talk about the project.
Cause yeah, remember how you and I talked about the?
Yep.
I never got so I was like, I don't know if this right.
So this? Right.
Yes.
Beautiful.
That'll be good.
Download it.
You could be able to run it right from YouTube too. If you
Yeah,
want.
yeah.
Or whatever you want to.
I
I'm a download guy. Too.
yeah, just to make sure. Is he, is your guy here?
No.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay, just want to make sure that we're not.
Yeah, I don't want to hold up the schedule.
But not in set 1935. No gun stuff. No Egypt.
In the process of streaming,
No really hot movements.
something's going to happen.
I'll just play it from here since this is not.
But it's the wash.
No racial
Perfect. All right.
Thank
You ready?
you. Yeah, sure.
All right, everybody, if I could please have your attention up here. As you have noticed, no doubt, we have a guest today. We're joined by Jan Lucanus, the founder and CEO of the Transmedia production company, Creative Impulse Entertainment. He's the creator of the most downloaded mixed martial arts comic book series, JFH, Justice for Hire. He is an award-winning filmmaker, a martial arts world champion, and a rapper, singer-songwriter. As a transmedia artist, Jan has been called a martial arts comic prodigy and an entertainment renaissance man for his work fusing comics, film, animation, and music, most notably for JFH, Justice for Hire. Jan also consults on business, production, creative strategies for companies and individuals across entertainment. He is a graduate of the New York University Maurice Kanbar Institute for Film and Television, Tisch School of the Arts, holding a degree in film production. Please welcome our guest.
Everyone, could you please stand up? So I like to start anything with all of us uniting our breath. I'm a Tai Chi player. It's my huge part of my life, and let's try it out. So if anyone has any injury, let me know, and we'll work around it. Feet shoulder length apart, tongue on the roof of your mouth, hands at your side. Imaginary string lifting you from the top of the head. Tongue is gently placed on the top of your mouth, ceiling, tucking the pelvis very gently. We'll just do a few breathing exercises. Palms facing down, fingers flat. And you're going to inhale and you're going to visualize your breath going into your diaphragm, your lower dantian, about 2 finger lengths below your belly button. And exhale and visualize pushing breath through your palms. Inhale. Bring the energy into the lower dantian. Exhale to the palms. One more breath. Try to visualize with your eyes open. See the breath with your eyes open. Exhale. And give it a color. Give your breath a color. Inhale, lift your palms to the side. You may need some room. Up. Big breath, big breath, big breath. Still breathing in and stretch up, up, up. Exhale down. Big breath. Out through the nose. 2 more. Inhaling in, see the breath, give it a color, goes into your lower dantian. Stretch up, up. Exhale down. And one more. Exhale. All right, beautiful. You can keep standing, you can sit, you can do anything you want. The reason I start pretty much any group interaction like that is because great art is made from intention. And one of the best ways to train intention is by training your breath, whether meditation, Tai Chi especially because of the pressure of an opponent. It's called push hands. That's the sparring aspect of Tai Chi. And I was on the U.S. push hands team and became captain of the team for a while, so it's a huge part of my life. So I like to do a lot of Tai Chi combined with anything that I'm doing. Breathing, so important. So thank you for having me, Steele.
Absolutely, of course.
And this is my first time really talking to a class. I've talked to classes before, but this is like, official, formal kind of thing. So this is fun.
Yeah.
I wanted to show you guys a little clip from Justice for Hire. It's like the most downloaded mixed martial arts comic book series. We've done a lot. We combine a bunch of web series and short films and comic books and music and all this stuff into one world to kind of tell the story in different aspects of media. So I want to show you this little clip of, it's like a sneak peek at what's coming out next year. It's our last push from the last big story arc in Justice for Hire. We're combining and putting out a bundle. So here's a 40-second clip of that. So that'll be out next year, Q1. And thank you. Other side. So I want to start out with this really cool quote from a guy named Kevin Maurer. And it's franchise stories are like software. If you don't rigorously develop the larger story to perform in the formats and categories you want them to, they won't. And I think that's really beautiful. I didn't learn transmedia from anybody. It just kind of made sense to me. And it was also the flow of my life just kind of made it make sense. And Steele and I both have a mutual friend, Jeff Gomez, who runs Starlight Runner. And Jeff, we came in contact because of Justice for Hire. He's also a martial artist, and he was a fan of JFH, and I saw his TED Talk and cried. And because of his words on transmedia and integration and him being the leading mind in the space, I immediately reached out to him, and we became friends. And he started giving me some guidance on what we're doing with JFH for next year and beyond. So this is a really important quote, because I think that having gone through a lot of grassroots development work across entertainment, it made sense for me to start thinking about it in a more streamlined way. How could other creators get to this space and to engage an audience for a collective journey without having to make all the mistakes that I made? So I thought this quote was really wonderful in kind of summing up just some of the thinking that needs to go, the principles of thinking. I mean, it goes much deeper than this. But so what I'm working on now, I want to start with that, and we'll kind of backtrack into how we got there. We're creating you'll see it here, the next generation Marvel, where fans can create characters and stories. So what does that actually mean? It's called Creative Impulse. It's a digital platform we're building. Well, for our phase 1 business plan, we're essentially making movies with the entire world. That means we're essentially going to be putting out feature films, TV shows, and web series on a web platform, releasing them episodically, and then every week asking fans to create content with us, submit content, and the best content will be integrated into the film for the final release on traditional formats. The closest thing to this that exists right now is Joseph Gordon-Levitt's hitrecord.org. If you don't know about hitrecord.org, you have to know about it. It is so important. The entire world will eventually work with open collaboration and gamification, so you need to check out this website. It's amazing. And his is more about general collaborative art. It's a collaborative production company. What we're doing is basically taking that and putting it toward narrative worlds to build persistent narrative universes. That's kind of a byproduct of helping studios and make social films. So that's going to be pretty cool. Let's see, what else? Justice for Hire, just so you guys know, I'll be using that as the case study. But JFH is here's a little image of it. So JFH is the story of two vigilante fathers. They're two sons that start a hero for hire business in the global retribution industry that it spawns. So to an extent, our narrative is already built for open collaboration, people having their own justice teams. And since we're in the martial arts community, it's always been, people have been coming up to us that are fans of the videos that we started with and saying, hey, can we shoot something with you guys? That's been regular for us. So it made sense for us to have a world and a platform where we can actually bring people together to do exactly that. And, all this stuff that I've been doing for years. Creative Impulse started in 2003 as a junior at NYU. We've been running for 13 years. We started with music videos. We continued on with short films, and our short films won a bunch of awards, and that got us some money, and that money helped us to build out. We also did a bunch of viral content that was great, and it worked out really well for us and got us some consulting gigs with like Universal Music Group and other companies. And I've been running that for 13 years, and up until about 3 weeks ago, I was homeless, technically homeless, which really sucked. And that was about 18 months in the making. And why did I tell you that piece of information? I'm not, it's something that I've never really said before in public, especially over the last couple of months, because this is part of my new perspective of Transmedia. It's all part of the story, all of it. Everything that you are as an artist, as a leader, or as a technician working for a great leader, all of that combines to tell this amazing, intricate story. And how can you present it in a way for your business, for your brand, for your story? If any of you are filmmakers, how can you think about your story role in a way that all of those pieces, the pieces of you and the pieces of the characters, work together? So that's what and I'll put a pin in that. We'll talk about that a little bit more. The homeless thing, we'll put a little pin in and come back to. And but I want to give you a little more perspective of how I got to this point, how Justice for Hire got to this point, how NYU ties into it, and how our next phase in 2017, which is going to be awesome, comes into play. So Jeff, I mentioned Jeff Gomez. I call him Sensei. Not to his face all the time, but like in my mind, he's a master. He's really the leading mind in the space. And Jeff and I were having a conversation a few weeks ago because we've been doing some pitches to the music industry that are going to be very, very interesting for Transmedia. So Jeff said something just in passing. I had to write it down because it was just so cool. And I probably butchered it. It was way better when he said it. But he said, Transmedia is the orchestration of multiple platforms that envelop an audience to take you on a collective journey, to take a collective journey with you. And the way I personally see Transmedia is threefold. It is corporate, it's IP, intellectual property, and artist. The artist's voice is so important. And when any part of that trifecta is removed, the entire machine is disrupted. So I want to give a couple of examples of that. Imagine Star Wars without George Lucas and 20th Century Fox. George Lucas has lived long enough to become the villain to a certain extent, but that's still part of the story. That's still part of what we all follow. And another great example is Jay-Z without Rockefeller Records and Sean Carter. Jay-Z is not a person; it's a brand. It represents the figurehead, Sean Carter. And without that, it wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't buy. I mean, I never bought Rockaware. But, a lot of people did, so it became a huge company. Apple without Steve Jobs and the iPod, though, that trifecta, again, you see it all the time. And even Marvel right now with Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige is, he's an amazing, amazing leader. And that he's a great example of what DC doesn't really have, which is a great leader setting the tone for their stories right now. It's that they've backtracked, saying that we're the gritty universe, and then they come out a few months later after people bash Batman versus Superman, saying, we're going to add some humor to our universe. You go to Target, and you can see the lack of brand clarity with what they're doing, where you'll have Batman be brooding and violent in this toy right here, and, 5 feet away, you'll have Batman be super cute. When you look at Spider-Man, Spider-Man's always the same. If he's a big toy, if he's a little plush doll, it's the same feeling. And the way DC could adjust that is through transmedia franchise narrative, management, and writing. So if we could clarify what their 52, I think they would have 52 worlds.
Yeah.
So if people knew that, most fans don't necessarily know that. And there's stuff happening in the TV world that I don't follow. But I'm sure they'll bring it all together. It's just part of what we're here to talk about. So let me take it back to.
Hold on, we have a question.
Yeah.
Can you just repeat what Jeff said? You said
Sure, yeah. Let me see. Jeff said, and again, this is me butchering what Jeff said. What did Jeff say?
Transmedia.
We can go down the hall and ask him.
There it is.
Yeah, right here. Yeah, transmedia is the orchestration of multiple platforms that envelop an audience to take a collective journey with you. Let me know if you need me to repeat it again.
And IP is like the network.
IP is intellectual property.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's my hope in sharing the genesis of Creative Impulse and Justice for Hire, and we control like 54 intellectual properties IP, and with creators, writers, directors, across the world actually, and 44 of which I think are in comic book form, something like that. So, but I'm going to focus on JFH as a case study. It's my personal baby, and it's been a vehicle for me to learn so much and to meet so many people. So. Yeah, we'll focus on that, and hopefully, any ideas shared here will augment your journey. And my consistent emphasis is always to say, take what works for you, and leave the rest and remix it for yourself. So, America is the greatest remix nation in the world. So it's hence us needing to rethink copyright right now in our culture. So, yeah, let's see where I'm at here. All right, so. I'm a New Yorker, born and raised primarily in Chinatown. Both of my parents were martial artists, and I grew up, when I was younger, I was pretty much like a cool, fun kung fu kid. And then my parents started having some marital problems, and I became a fat, nerdy kid that no one liked. So I got this amazing experience of being able to look at people while I was fat and nerdy, and look at cool and study cool, because I was cool. Then all of a sudden, I wasn't cool. And it didn't just have to do with being fat and nerdy. There are plenty of cool, fat, nerdy kids. But it was just stuff that I was going through that I didn't realize at the time. But I was very sensitive, and I got this opportunity to really look at how cool works. And that was cool. So I'll get back to that later. But, when I started doing Tai Chi again, was pretty much when I shed a bunch of weight and started really getting into that connectivity of who I am and how I literally work and flow within, Tai Chi's all about flow. And so how can I flow within this group of people outside? How does that work? And it breaks down to some really amazing, intricate, primal things. There's a lot of primal sensibilities in Tai Chi that you start to really get aware of through the breath control. So I'm a huge fan of that, and my coach, Josh Wadeskin, who was a chess champion, who eventually became a martial arts champion, really helped me a lot to understand the breaking down of various moments in martial arts through a Tai Chi lens to understand body mechanics and the mechanics of thought process that go behind every movement. So a lot of what we're doing with Creative Impulse is actually taking those same mechanics and applying them to media. And I can talk all day about that, but this is a general overview. So my dad was a comic book critic and a writer. So he was a critic as a part of several groups. One was Comics Cavalcade, another one was the Marvel Zombie Society. But these groups in the 80s and maybe early 90s worked together to basically have, at the end of every comic book, you're reading a comic book, there's a letters section. And it's letters from fans to the editor and the art team, etc. So this group of critics worked together to make sure that every Marvel release, every week, or every month, they at least had one letter in. So their collective always had a voice. And they actually helped to steer the Marvel Universe several times. It was significant enough that when my father made some criticisms about the lack of diversity in comic books, that he got a chance to sit down with the vice president of Marvel, Jim Shooter, and Jim was like, well, if you think you could do better, do it yourself and come work for me. So Jim Shooter became my father's mentor. And my dad was cool enough to bring me around as he went to Marvel and as he went to Valiant, which Jim co-founded. And after Jim had a falling out with Valiant, Dad brought me with him to Defiant because Jim had him as his writer there, one of his writers. Defiant is another offshoot comic book company. And Tangent, the reasoning behind me starting Creative Impulse was actually pushed by my father because of the issues that Jim Shooter had with Valiant. My dad was consistent about me understanding both the artistic side and the corporate side, the business side of how the industry works. So, hence having a company for 13 years. Very thankful for that. So my dad co-wrote The Good Guys at Valiant with, not Valiant, Defiant with Jim Shooter. And Defiant was, the guys that worked there, guys and gals that worked there were super cool, and they were really into like cutting edge action cinema. And I grew up on kung fu movies from the 70s and 80s that my mom and dad used to watch even before I was born. So when my father discovered John Woo, does anyone know John Woo in here? Okay, cool, there we go. He brought home The Killer, and I freaked out. I'd never seen anything like it. I didn't know that a movie could feel like that. I didn't know a camera could move like that, and I was just captivated. Then he brought home Hard Boiled, and I cried because the action was just so crazy. And you really don't see stuff like that. Anyway, so my first few business attempts failed. I was 12, and I wanted to start build this amazing game console. And it was like this open world game console. And pitching the small business association with my mom didn't really get us anywhere. I couldn't find a claim, which was like the closest company. I'm like, you're in Glen Cove, but where? This is before like internet was really, really, readily available. And then at 14, my best friend and I tried to launch a story-driven laser tag venue, and we thought that was going to be awesome. And just didn't materialize. But I still think about that. And obviously, with this concept of real-world heroes, I think there's an element of that still there. So yeah, my father consistently pushed me to draw comics, and I really didn't want to do that. I like to draw, but I didn't want to learn how to professionally do it. I didn't want to discipline myself in that way. It just didn't resonate. I wanted to make video games, I thought. I'm like, let me just make video games. So I went to code C++ at a summer session at Columbia University, and I hated it, lucky for me. And so I paid a kid $50 to do my final project, which was checkers. And I presented it to the teacher as my own, which was awesome because technically that's true. That's called executive producer credit. So I'm like, cool. And I got out of that. And the next summer, my dad was coming out of a meeting with Neil Adams, who you may know is an amazing comic book icon. Neil and Frank Miller pretty much changed the industry in 1986, both with their own work. So anyway, and Neil's an important part of the story. He'll pop up a couple times. But yeah, my dad saw the New York Film Academy walk in Union Square, and he's walking home, and he comes to me. He's like, "Hey, I got this pamphlet for the New York Film Academy. Do you want to do this?" And I immediately thought about John Woo. I'm like, "Yeah, sure. That sounds cool." And that was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, and it's affected my entire life to this point. I was, I think, in the first high school program the New York Film Academy had, and my teacher, Mike Sandoval, who eventually became the chair of the New York Film Academy, he was at NYU at the time, and he walked me into NYU, right into the dean's office, and said, "Jan wants to go here." And I got an early admission, and I loved NYU. It was great. And Mike did a lot more than that for me. He told me that when you go to film school, make sure you come out of your 4 years with a feature screenplay. He's like, make sure you come out with that feature script done. Most people never finish their feature. And so for me, I have to take anything anybody says to me and just kind of like weigh it, remix it for myself, and then apply it. So I'm like, I'm a comic book kid. That means franchise. So I need to come out of my 4 years with a franchise rather than simply a feature script, because I want to build something. And I don't know, I felt like the world was going to need that type of thinking. So hence Justice for Hire. Justice for Hire started in that class in New York Film Academy. I don't want to date myself, but it was a while ago. So a friend named Jack used to come up to me and put his arm around me and sing Ebony and Ivory. And I had never heard that song before. I had no idea what he was talking about. But I was like, that sounds like amazing names for like action heroes. And he was a huge fan of Pulp Fiction. So I had never seen that film. And I didn't see it for like another 8 years or something like that. I just didn't watch it. But I always remember the commercials, and I remember John Travolta and Sam Jackson's characters, and I was just like, man, these guys, they're cool. They're like actually cool. Like, what would happen if they had sons? And how would those guys be like, if they had kids? And I kept on thinking about my relationship with my father. I always used to have these fantasies about being a superhero with my dad. He did kung fu. I grew up watching him do kung fu. I did kung fu, so I was like, man, that'd be so cool. And I started drawing these little characters called Ebony and Ivory, and that was the sons' names. And Justice for Hire, that's what they did. We shot that summer the first Ebony and Ivory on VHS, and it was a sparse script. I threw one kick in it, and we never finished it. But the idea stayed with me. I went to Jack's house in New Jersey, and then he took me to see a ska band. It was great. So I went into NYU consistently thinking about this action film idea. And when I started doing my sophomore year, and they started giving you access to cameras, first year, I'm not sure if anyone has experienced NYU filmmaking, but you don't touch a camera for your first year. So I was lucky enough to have done 2 years at the Film Academy before getting to NYU. So I was already planning out all my films, freshman year, and Ebony and Ivory was one of them. So we did that and did this like immaculate student film marketing campaign. But it was like an action opus that's online. You could check it out. It's like 10 minutes or something like that. And we just had such a great reaction from it that it made sense to bring it back for my senior thesis. And my senior thesis film was also called Justice for Hire, and we were trying to do it within the school, but I pitched it to the production class, and by the time I was a senior, the idea of the world of Justice for Hire had expanded from just fathers and sons that do martial arts together that are vigilantes to the idea of formalizing vigilantism into an industry. And this industry had all these different teams that you could hire. So, my pitch to my teacher, Ezra Sachs, who's an amazing guy, and the rest of my class was I had a bunch of pro fighters show up in suits, and they put everybody through several tiers of security checkpoints. So it made them really, really hard to get into the classroom. And then I made them wait until I was escorted in with the cinematographer and the choreographer, and that pissed them off even more. So we didn't get chosen to shoot the film in the senior production class. And I later asked Ezra, I'm like, why didn't you choose me? You saw my last film, and our previous short film had won a bunch of awards because it's called Hotel Harborview. It was based on a Japanese manga that my father, gave to me and said, you should probably shoot this. And I was like, huh, you're right. And we shot for shot, a gangster film noir, that was basically set in Japan. And that helped us get the money to actually shoot Justice for Hire. So my teacher saw that and he said, Jan, you don't need this class. You're going to get it done no matter what. And he was right. And my mom and I went and talked to the dean, the chair, and he set up a special program for us to get the project done with NYU insurance and some equipment. And it was great. So my senior thesis was pretty much done outside of the curriculum. And that was incredibly fortunate for us because we shot a 47-minute Super 16mm featurette, and like a bunch of martial artists in it that are now pro fighters, and that became the foundation for our company. We took that featurette and we cut it up into 4 DVDs, and there was no outlet really for, YouTube wasn't big yet, and we were trying to figure out how to get people to see this thing, and we had, through martial artists, we were inducted to the Martial Arts Hall of Fame and some other stuff for this film, so we're like, man, we got to get people to see this. So we cut up in 4 DVDs and we packaged it with our comic books. My father was so inspired by the production, before we even shot, all the production effort going into my senior thesis of Justice for Hire, that he wrote a comic book script. And that comic book script added even more characters. So we took that, adapted it into a screenplay, and then readapted it into a comic book, asked Neil Adams to come on and do it. And Neil did like 2 pages for us. And then he was like, you know what, I got to focus on directing. So God bless Neil. And he'll come back into the story later. But, we had this comic script, and we cut up these DVDs, and we polybagged them. We found a distributor, Diamond Comics, which is the major comic book distributor. And they only put us out because of our following in the martial arts community. And we became the first comic book series in history to come polybagged with live-action DVDs in every issue. And the live-action DVDs essentially were showcasing a lot of the fight scenes that were in the comics, and the comics were a totally new vision for Justice for Hire. The senior thesis had some elements that were pulled out and considered canon for our comic book series, but we've never released the 47 minutes like officially. So we're going to do that. Actually, no, it was on Views. It was on Views, if anyone remembers Views, for like, I don't know, 6 months until Views closed down or changed their business model. And so it's not really out, so we'll put it out eventually. But I want to talk about how we even started thinking about comics, because I was a film student. I thought of myself as a director. And why would a director go into the comic book industry? And when people started calling me a publisher, I was like, it just didn't feel right to me. I'm like, I don't want to be considered a publisher. That seems so far away from what I want to do, which is a filmmaker. Be a filmmaker. And I also forgot to mention that I made some really interesting moves because of Justice for Hire. I got offered my first 3 feature film directing gigs, and I turned all of them down, including a $5 million deal for Justice for Hire. And this is 2005, and I was just telling him about this on the train. This is 2005. $5 million in 2005 is not a lot of money. $5 million now is a lot of money, comparatively, because of the entry point for film production is just totally different. Digital cameras sucked back then. The idea of lugging around 35 millimeter and shooting it, there was a bunch of problems that it just didn't feel right. And I was also talking to Sony about doing a $10 million version, and that actually never panned out. And they cited that there was no market for martial arts. And 2 months later, what happened? The Ultimate Fighter premiered, and blew up the martial arts market and redefined martial arts in America, bringing mixed martial arts to the forefront. So that's just an interesting part of the story, and I'll come back into more Hollywood interconnectivity in a second. But why did we start comic books? Why did we go into that? In 2006, we went to Comic-Con because I was looking at comics just for Justice for Hire. I was like, I want to pre-visualize how I want to see this feature film made, and how I want to make it. I want to direct this thing, so I want to pre-visualize it. We went to Comic-Con and we started pitching different comic companies. We met with Ross Ritchie and Boom. We met with Mike Richardson and Dark Horse. We met with Image, and Image didn't pick us up, but a wonderful gentleman whose name I'm so sorry to forget, but I will remember when I look through my old emails on my other account, was kind enough to come on and help us retool it for the market. And he cited detail. He was like, look, you need a lot more detail in your artwork because fans care. And I'm like, this guy's totally right. And we retooled it and went back and forth, and you can go all day without putting your art out for people. You can never put your art out for people and just work on it quietly. And I'm of the mindset of, if you have something to say, eventually you just got to start saying it. So we put the book out. Let's see, the end of 2007. I think it was December 29th, 2007. Our first book came out officially through Diamond Comic Distributors and all comic book shops. And we just skated the line on the top 300 comics in the nation. Not enough for Diamond to keep us on board for more than 4 issues, so we had a 4-issue print run. But within that time, we got all this grassroots support from the comic book industry. And just amazing, amazing things were said that just kind of helped me and the team continually feel great about what we were doing. So here's some of my dad's comics. You can look at that. That's the Good Guys from Defiant. That's Tengu. So Tengu and Justice for Hire, my dad was reignited to start writing comics again. We took around Comic-Con in 2006. And the most important thing that happened, besides us not getting picked up by any of the publishers we pitched, was us seeing Deepak Chopra and his son Gotham and Grant Morrison sit down at a panel for Virgin Comics. They were just launching that summer, and I grew up with an Indian guru, so for them to talk about bringing a lot of the Indian culture to America, and the art was astounding. It blew my mind, and I couldn't even believe I was sitting there, because the conversation went from comic books to to how can we create this collective change in the world? How can we use this format to bring together artists, great minds, musicians, directors, game developers, everybody, scientists, religious icons into this format, into the comic book format, and use it as a development platform for other media. And I was just sitting there, like my jaw dropped to the ground. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. It felt like full circle to me because I grew up in a very spiritual family. So, seeing that, I walked out of the Virgin Comics panel and said to myself, man, we can't be taken seriously in the industry if we come out with one book or two books. One book is vanity publishing. Two books is maybe you're going to do something. So, but I wanted Creative Impulse to be a brand. We were already a production company. We already knew how to do, to make stuff visually. But how do we get ourselves taken seriously? So I immediately started looking for other creators, other writers, other directors, and by doing that, this weight was lifted off my shoulders. Like the weight of being the director, the weight of being the only creative voice in an ecosystem. And it started. It just changed me. It helped me become more of a caretaker, and it helped my own work. Essentially, helped my own work immensely. So we found a few launch partners. One of which was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master John Machado, who's from the iconic Machado brothers family, and he's a UFC coach. And another friend of mine had just come out of a Buddhist temple and was just about to become a monk. And he was just like, you know what? I've got it right. And he just got it left. And he came to New York, and I was like, huh. You want to write a comic? And he wrote this amazing book called Bardo, and it's about the unraveling of consciousness after death. It's amazing. He's brilliant. So, and we basically launched with 5 titles. And immediately we started getting like a game developer to come on for Tengu. Bardo was being sought after by a Japanese horror company upon launch. And, we really started seeing the value of being a brand rather than just being a lone creator in a sea of lone creators. There's always value to the label. Right now, we're in a scenario where the labels are being disrupted. I don't just mean in the music industry. I mean in general. Hollywood's being decentralized. But there is power. There's power to unity. There's power to an image. So, hence us wanting to be the next generation Marvel. So, 06 was a big deal for changing the mindset and becoming more of a caretaker, becoming more of a home for artists. And when we picked up our first comic book art production deal, we were working with a middleman, basically, an art studio that had a stable of artists, and this stable of artists were pretty good. And we were like, okay, great, so we'll work with you guys, and we were paying them, and apparently they weren't paying the artists what we were paying them. They weren't giving the money that we gave to them to the artists, so the artists started contacting us directly, complaining about the studio. So we cut the studio out after an amazing phone call, which I had to record because it was just so intense. And we just started doing direct deals with the artists, and what we were doing just intuitively about structuring fairness. That's a huge part of my personal vibe. It's like, be fair. How can you be fair, and what is fairness? And how can we put that in a contract? So we started doing that with artists, and it immediately made us incredibly endearing to artists. And we every week we get tons of submissions from screenwriters to artists to etc. So so much that we actually can't look at most of them. I wish we could. I'm sorry. I'm like the full-time guy at Creative Impulse. I have a partner in LA, so he's a consultant for all the studios. So but we have a bunch of partners, but not enough time. So where was I at?
Artists.
Yeah, artists. So yeah, I mean we basically consider ourselves a home for artists at this point, and but I want to drink some water. I'm going somewhere with all this. It'll be great. Okay, cool. All right, so digital comics. Let's get to digital comics. And actually, as a segue into digital comics, we'll go back to filmmaking. So I told you about us skating on that line for the top 300 comics in the nation, which didn't allow us to have our vendor. I mean, we're still vendors with Diamond Comics, but they wouldn't distribute any more than 4 books from us. So we did a bi-monthly run of the DVD comic book combo, and that's part of what I was saying before of reality forcing me to really deepen my understanding of what I had versus what I wanted to do. So I wanted to tell this whole story, this one story arc of Justice for Hire. I just wanted to make a cool action film. But I was consistently forced to deepen my understanding of the story that I had in front of me. And by continually being forced to deepen it, having a different understanding of how different areas of media work together. We couldn't release any more comics, and there were no digital comics yet in 2008. I mean, there's drive-through comics, but there weren't any like significant. They're our partners. They're awesome. God bless them. They're great. They're actually one of my favorite digital comic platforms, drive-through comics right now. But they pitched us in 2007, and it just didn't feel right because they were just distributing PDFs, and now it's kind of cooler, but back then it didn't make sense because it wasn't a thing yet. So we were trying to figure out how can we engage our audience. We don't want to leave these people hanging, and we have 8 more issues. It was a 12-issue story arc that we had planned. So how are we going to engage our audience? And we didn't, my senior thesis was a very challenging production. I lost a bunch of friends on it. I didn't even realize that I harbored some pain until probably 3 years ago when I spoke to my old boss at Rock Hard Films, which is a top music video director, a music video production company, and he's also an NYU guy, if you know Mark, amazing guy. And I was talking to him and just realized that I was holding on to some fear that I had that had gathered from doing this project and losing all these friends that were like my people throughout my 4 years at NYU. And that's a story for, that's a whole thing. But, I didn't realize that I had that and at this time. And I'm like, man, we need to engage our audience. So how are we going to do this? And I don't want to do a big production because I didn't understand that I was scared. So let's just shoot smaller stuff. Let's make a web series. And that's what we did. I had all this amazing martial arts choreography team just kind of sitting there waiting to do something. And they wanted to do it for Justice for Hire. So we started doing this web series, and we immediately started getting a pretty cool reaction from our audience. And they were like, this is great. And the idea behind the web series, because I didn't want to shoot something that was part of that 12-issue main story arc, I didn't want to go, our senior thesis looks so cool comparatively. I mean, that's a different time now. Compared to digital video at that time, was shot on film. So I was like, this is going to look way low budget. Well, why don't we just start developing characters around and stories around these 4 issues? So we started telling the stories in between the issues. And that's what the web series was. We took characters that were mentioned in the issue and we gave them their own fight scenes and etc. And just kind of, actually I think I have a picture of that. Let's see what happens. Got a whole bunch of stuff here for you guys. You can talk about. Yeah, I'll leave that up. I can look for that now. But anyway, we did that. Worked out really well. And it just taught me something about integrating web content into comic book content. And we had already done the film DVD stuff. And so there's different tiers. There's the premium tier, and then there's some lower budget content that can still all work together. Kind of like the Netflix series for the Marvel content and the premium movies that come out. Totally different production value. Totally different. They've been able to give it a vibe, a very clear tone, and differentiate them. There's still very clear production values, different production values. So one of the things we shot for the web series, actually we shot it as a test, something called Weapon Camera Movement. We designed our own martial arts choreography camera system, and we shot it in 2006, did an experimental camera test. And that's online too. It's called JFH Brawl. We eventually released it as part of the web series, but it floated around Hollywood for a while as we were pitching the feature. It's all good. It's all good. So JFH Brawl, won a bunch of awards for us as well, like behind the scenes, and we premiered it at Comic-Con and did some stuff like that. But because of that one piece, that Justice for Hire Brawl, that wasn't even out on YouTube at that time as part of our web series, we used to play it at our Comic-Con booths because we were very close to the chest with it. Closest thing that you can think of is how the Raid is shot, or the Raid 2. It's very similar to what we were doing to our camera system. So we would play that at our Comic-Con booth every year. And in 2009, Comixology came up to us and said, "This is awesome. Can we do an app?" And we're like, "What?" They're like, "We'll build you a digital comic book app that has your videos in it." And I was just like, "That's freaking awesome. Yeah, man, hell yeah, let's do that." So we became one of Comixology's launch partners. This is before they launched their app. When they launched the app in July of 2009 and immediately became the #1 app on iTunes, we were the #1 action-adventure digital download, Justice for Hire. And that lasted for, I think, 9 or 12 weeks. And as we started falling off that #1 spot on action-adventure, we realized we were #1 in the martial arts genre. And we stayed on that top 25 list on both, and on the martial arts genre for about 2 years until they discontinued it. 2 or 3. I think they discontinued in 2012. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so the digital comics side changed the game for us because all of a sudden we had all of these eyeballs, and that brought got us the attention of agents at Endeavor before they merged with William Morris and CAA, and it was really interesting to get the offers from these agents, and it just didn't resonate. It was I wasn't in a place where it felt right to have a director who's while he may have hit films, come on board and take my personal baby and do something with it that we didn't necessarily have creative input on, especially while we have this audience that we talk to all the time. We talk to our audience, and it's not like we have a huge Twitter following or social media. It's like they come up to us, they call me, they'll send me emails. It's like, so I was just like, well, how about we work with you guys and we do the film with our team? And they're like, well, no, that's not the way it works. So we turned down the Endeavor offer and the CAA offer, and that was a huge turning point because for years I kind of fantasized, my man, yeah, we're going to do this big film. It's going to be amazing. And that was the moment where a lot of my team, the second moment, the first time was turning down that $5 million. The second time, third moment, was turning down another offer from a guy who wanted to buy our company and give it to his wife as a wedding present. That was weird. And so another Justice for Hire fan. And but this one, the team was really upset because like, Jan, look, this is our ticket. And I'm like, no, something else has to be for us. So there's got to be something more significant than giving your property off and having it be another film in a slate of films. There's got to be something more significant. So and that's hence us coming back to that whole idea of a fan-powered cinematic universe. The whole idea of having fans create their own content when everyone's walking around with a production studio basically in your pocket. People create every day. We're actually in to steal Kevin Mauer's words, we're in the age of the creator-consumer. So people are creating with your content all the time. So how come you're not guiding that experience? Directors are really important because they're people with big hearts that can gather a bunch of people and guide them to create something. It's not an art form. It's a craft. So it requires a lot of an understanding of multiple talents. So, but I digress. So yeah, the Comixology deal helped us a lot, not just with the Hollywood side, but also helped us leverage other digital comic book distributors. So one of our first deals in Hollywood was with David Uslan, who's Michael Uslan's son, who produces all the Batman films. So David had a new company called Graphically, and Graphically was the top competitor to Comixology. So we did a contest with Graphically. We brought on Neil Adams and John Machado, had people submit art, and we were doing a motion comic animation to basically showcase the feeling of our comics cinematically. Like, how can we showcase this without spending $1 million to shoot a crazy action scene where we're driving a car through a 64 building? So, we did this, and we released a new comic, a JFH comic, the first digital exclusive JFH comic. It's called Issue Number 0, and it's a prequel to the entire Justice for Hire universe. And within 2 weeks, we pushed 75,000 reads, and that essentially outperformed Marvel and DC's average of 2013 average of 43,000. And that's not to say that Marvel's top book doesn't push 180,000 units, sometimes 300,000 units. I think it was Walking Dead that pushed 300,000. But the average, the average. So anyway, that was really, really cool. And we leveraged that information to get us a co-financing deal for a Justice for Hire feature film with a Canadian company. And and that deal allowed us to bring on some investor financing and gave me space to write the Justice for Hire screenplay, a prequel screenplay, because we already had one that was done that we were pulling the comic books from. So, I recalled something, all this was happening, and I was starting to get some circular Hollywood speak from, and I'm not anti-Hollywood at all. I just, I recognize something that I call the veil of fear in Hollywood, that a lot of executives, and a lot of people, not just executives, almost anybody that works there wants you to believe that they're something that they're not. It's very subtle, and it's consistent. It's so consistent that it can convince you to do the same thing. I do my best to speak as straight as possible, and I've had to learn how to deal. Yeah, how do you deal with that type of language? It's a very particular use of language, and unfortunately, Tai Chi. And you gotta, sometimes in Tai Chi, it's not all about flowing through it. Sometimes you break through it too. So I'll talk about that in a second. So I recall something that my advisor Steve Crone said, and Steve was a friend that I met through the Hollywood and Games Summit years ago, and he gave a talk there. He was the COO of Village Roadshow Pictures. He oversaw all of the Matrix trilogy and a bunch of other stuff. And Steve had my team and I over at his place once to his awesome home theater, a really cool theater in his house. That just like sit 150 people in. And we screened Justice for Hire and all of the shorts, the weapon cannon movement, all the stuff we were walking around Hollywood with. And Steve was like, this is my senior thesis, and then the essentially stuff we shot on video that we were running around town with. And he's like, look, man, this is all cool, but you need to shoot something that really sings, where every shot sings. So, and I appreciate that level of refinement, because it's like, especially when you're an independent creator, you can think your stuff is awesome, but there's always somebody that has a sharper eye than you that can, if you listen to them and kind of find the things that resonate with you, you can actually improve your craft. So I'm like, all right, we got to shoot something else. And, I had this new feature script done, and his words popped into my head, and yeah, I was scared. Like I said before, I had this fear from shooting that first that big senior thesis. I'm like, man, okay, I got to do something, and I got to do it now. And Neil Adams was like, the time is now, Jan. You got to just shoot anything. So, and I had done a bunch of in prep for this moment, shot a bunch of music videos and other stuff, and we decided to do a Kickstarter. So we did a Kickstarter for my wife. Had this idea. She's a filmmaker. She had this amazing idea for bringing the heroes to Papua New Guinea, having like a social justice aspect to what we're doing. And so Papua New Guinea, if you're not aware, is currently considered or at least was 2 years ago, the bloodiest city on the earth. And it's the gang violence towards women there is like crazy. Gang violence in general is crazy there, and they have makeshift guns that won't shoot 2/3 of the time, but it's scary idea. So she was like, why don't we address this issue and send our characters over there? So, and she was developing her own comic, and we did a crossover where we brought her character to life in this thing. So the Kickstarter was successful. We had the budget to shoot, and we shot at the end of 2013. We released in 2014, and that also helped us raise more, not just Kickstarter money, but the film itself helped us raise more investor capital. With that, we put out a Justice for Hire Knuckle Sandwich Edition graphic novel. So here's this is Retribution Task Force. That's the And you saw a little clip of that before. This is the senior thesis short. This is weapon camera movement. This is a book that was done on the senior thesis short that I shared with Spike Lee that came out like right after we did it. There's our animation. You saw little clips of that. But the big thing about the Knuckle Sandwich Edition that I think is super important is that by this time we had this huge, I mean, as you can see, this timeline, if you go into it, it's like we have tons and tons and tons of documentation that that back up this every point in this timeline. It's only gotten bigger. So, you know, for us, we kept on writing all these stories, and it started feeling bigger than a feature film. And you know, we were just talking on the train about Jeff Gomez just read the newest feature script, which we're working on for this platform rather than for like a traditional release for our digital web platform. And it's, you know, watch the stuff. I don't want to. If you want to watch the shorts, you'll have your own opinions. I felt the last short was a little too heavy-handed because we were missing some of our core team members behind camera. So you know, we're lightening things up with the next iteration. But at this point, we've had so much material. You know, we have so much material for Justice for Hire across different platforms, and different scripts, and we're like, well, what do we do with all this stuff? What do you do with your creative thought matrix for your property? Because you're not just talking about a film, you're talking about an intellectual property that can exist on multiple formats, and then if you apply best practices of transmedia, then you can execute orchestrally each one of these areas of media to, again, bring the audience on a collective journey with you. So last year we released a Justice for Hire graphic screenplay. So the graphic screenplay, I think I might have a little, it's like a first of its kind of thing that we put out, where our comic book bleeds, there we go. Our comic book basically bleeds into a script. And you know, as you start getting into the pages of the script, the colors start to fade away. You start to get into pencils, and you're like reading a script, and there's like pencils on the page, and then it actually becomes a script. So we put this out last year, and we've had some, you know, been honored by some friends who've done similar things since. And this was a big deal for me because this was the first screenplay that we wrote that we were adapting the comic book from. So this is essentially the whole story arc. I mean, the vibe of Justice for Hire in this screenplay is basically Fast and Furious, except with martial arts instead of cars, meets the Warriors. That's kind of our thing. So, you know, we got to finally express the entire storyline, and we have a transmedia timeline that's online right now that kind of showcases how all the little points from the web series to the short films to even the rap song that the two of the characters do in the script, how they all tie together. So, you know, Justice for Hire, again, as a case study, has just helped me as a person. It's been my vehicle for, you know, as a creator. It's pushed me to push my company to new places, and yeah, it's been an amazing journey. And so why did I tell you that up until a few weeks ago I was homeless? And I'll add that basically my wife and I are now separated, which happened right around the same time. And this was basically 18 months in the making when we ran out of investor capital. So, you know, as I said before, this is all part of that transmedia storyline. And expressing it in an open and honest way directly ties into the art. It directly ties into my relationship with each one of you. You know, how can I present myself rather than saying, hey, look, I'm this executive that you probably should have heard of, or you know, I'm this artist that's done all this cool stuff. Like, you know, I'm a person going through things like everybody does. And, you know, I think that's really important in terms of remaining accessible in the current marketplace. Like, authenticity is the major coin. You know, how can we be as authentic and as loving and as open as possible for each other so we can actually help the world and help each other to be the best we possibly can be. And, you know, so that is part of my artist trifecta for artist, intellectual property, and corporate. It's being able to talk about that and showcasing how these experiences affect my art that I'm going to guide. I think it's really important to look at the artist as your host for an experience. And while you may be a director or you may be crafting intellectual property for a transmedia strategy, you need to be able to help guide your experience, in an authentic way, in an open and honest way. But a bunch of cool things. I mean, this is all the homelessness and all that stuff. I mean, so it was all predictable. So it wasn't like, oh no, I'm sleeping on the street. Like it was enough. I knew enough of my own intuitive life map that I'm like, I'm gonna go through this. It's gonna be fine. While I was technically homeless and friends were allowing me to sleep on their floor and stuff like that, and waking up all achy and sucked. Our tech startup was chosen as Startup of the Week on Startup Fund in San Francisco, and started getting phone calls, from all these different development companies and VC firms, which is great. Justice for Hire. I don't know how this happens. This is one of my weaknesses. I need an analytics guy. We hit #1 in Australia, so it's like somehow we keep on hitting #1 with our comics with no marketing budget. So and #3 in Chile. So #1 in Australia on iPhone, and #3 in Chile on iPhone. And a bunch of other cool things happening. And now I'm not homeless, so it's great. And everything's coming together in a wonderful way. So, but yeah, this is all part of it. I just wanted to share that kind of stuff with you. And I look at it as no pain, no gain. If you know something is going to happen, you gotta experience it with equilibrium and get the most out of it you possibly can. And I think that's almost everything I had to say. I want to leave you guys with this last quote from Kevin Maurer. Today, the audience tells their story using parts of your story, and you must recognize that an ongoing part of your story will now be told through their story. So I think that's super important for the subject of this class, and this is a great thinkers class, Transmedia. So it's important you guys suck that in. Anyway, thank you guys for having me. I want to open this up to questions, and yeah.
Questions? Gotta get ready.
You mentioned right towards the closing, big reveal, that big heavy revelation at the beginning. You're going through stuff. You're a person. When I look at this here, that's you in the middle, right?
I'm actually a cast member.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm saying is, connected to this, were there storylines previous to now, the present, where you were telling your story almost verbatim? Did you find yourself almost like eerily in your comic to an extent that either helped you or was detrimental in some way?
One of my biggest problems has been giving myself fully. So, which is part of what that new script that I sent to Jeff is about. It's like giving myself. So for me, I've had a lot of influence in my life where, especially growing up in a like, what does spiritual mean? What does that actually mean? Growing up in a spiritual family and hearing my mom's voice come into my head and say, "Don't curse, Winky, don't curse." She calls me Winky. Like, don't curse. And so, I would edit myself. And it wasn't until it was rap music. It was me performing I perform on like the underground rap scene here in New York. It was me getting offered record deals all the time that I kept turning down because I'm like, no, I don't want your record deal. I've got a company and I don't trust you to be a great business person. Like, it was there's a truth coming out of my music that people were feeling live, and this is me like not writing stuff and perform. I perform on a circuit called Freestyle Mondays. Freestyle Mondays is the longest running live hip hop cipher, and it's basically like a dojo for rap. It's amazing, and the senior students are like black belts, and they guide. It's uplifting. It's positive. Like these people, they bring new people in. They encourage them. No, it's not battle rap. I mean, now they're starting to integrate some battle rap, but when I was doing it, it was all about feeling good and uplifting other MCs. So that process helped me find my voice, of just kind of freestyling off the top of my head something that was in my heart. And because that was resonating on a level that brought people and opportunities to me, I'm like, well, how come my script isn't resonating on that level? Like, what is missing from my script that is in my music? So the new script deals with that a lot, where I'm like, okay, well, what do I have to say? So now I find myself very much in the script. Before, I would say it was more of a shell of myself, and people, we still garnered a lot of support, because I think people resonate with this idea of having a privatized justice, and the characters are fun and cool. Now, I'm not every character, I'm one of them, and one could say that a writer-director is every character, but I do my best to clarify the voices, and they're all based on other people. So
It's really cool. Like, you basically were doing Transmedia without even knowing it with the DVDs and your comics. I was wondering, has that continued on with all the other ones? Do you plan the comics with the graphic screenplay? Does that come with the DVD package and with the apps? When they download the app, do they get a video with that as well? How's that continue on?
so at this point, everything is so accessible that it's tough to justify packaging it when it's part of the exploration of the consumer, quote unquote, journey, right? So at this point, where we have other properties that have come out with animation and with some other transmedia-esque attributes, but for the most part, Justice for Hire, like I said, it's been like me going forward and saying this is the way it can work. And my personal desire, one of my personal desires for Creative Impulse is being a home for other artists like me that say, hey, look, I have this story and it works in all these different ways, and I'm a character in it, and I want to guide my audience on this journey. And that's not to say that I'm the main character, because I'm absolutely not. I probably will become a villain. Spoiler alert. But it's to answer your question. No, we don't do that with every property, and I think that right now Transmedia is becoming so much of a buzzword that you have people coming out and saying, "Oh, we're a transmedia production company. We have a transmedia property." What does transmedia mean? Jeff Gomez says it himself. He's like, "Hey, eventually what I do is going to be commonplace." So there's a timeline. There's a very definitive period of time where he can educate people on doing what is really just going to be the future of how everything is done. And open collaboration and gamification tie into that. So yeah.
Other thoughts? Questions?
Sure.
You use the word authenticity.
Yeah.
And I think the question I have is in regards to finding your own voice as a storyteller. Do you think that there's a progression to getting to that point, or is it always there? It's just a matter of molding it better and better?
I think finding your own voice should be underlined, because that's something that I really I read an article. I met with Ani Shankar last year. Went over to his place because we have a mutual friend, and probably 2 weeks before meeting with him, or 3 weeks, he was popped up in Esquire or something like that, and he was talking about finding your own voice, and it hit me hard because. I basically had to throw out 6 versions of the new screenplay. It's the first Justice for Hire script that I've written totally by myself, with pretty much no input. So I definitely think it's something that has to be refined. Part of the rap music was actually helped me refine my personal voice a lot, because of the freestyling, constantly having to say what's in my heart without thinking about it. You're going off the top of the head. So that was a great exercise for me to bring me back to, oh, these are the things I care about. This is how I actually feel about this situation I'm going through in my life. I didn't know I was feeling that, stuff like that. So I think for every person, it's going to be different. But somehow you have to, meditation, everyone should be meditating. It's these days there's no excuse. So, but besides standard meditation, I'm not meditating. My run is my meditation. Actual seated, quiet meditation, that's its own thing. But having exercises in your day and having time and space for those exercises, whether it's a hobby or actual physical exercise, to kind of clarify who you are. I think it's super important.
Other questions?
Yeah. So you mentioned you guys did a motion comic, right?
Mhm.
So I've only read the first one that Marvel did, the Spider-Woman.
Yeah.
But now that smartphones have emerged and touchscreens are so ubiquitous, I'm sure it's changed quite a bit since then. Because I remember the first one was it was a comic book with the images moved, and it was basically a video. But that.
And there was voice, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that could be grounds for like a really interesting like immersive environment because you could swipe left and right and it'll change.
Dude, yeah, $1 billion, $billion business idea right there.
What, do you,
VR, the motion comics. That's amazing.
Yeah. So is that somewhere that people? Because I haven't heard anything about this basically since I read the Spider-Woman one like 6 or 7 years ago. Are motion comics really going anywhere? Are people still playing with that, or is it so small that nobody?
Motion comics I forgot who showed it to me. I think it was David Usel. Someone showed me like motion comics in 2008, and they're like, "Jan, this is gonna be big." And I'm like, "No one's gonna like this. This sucks." This absolutely sucks. And then I saw Neil Adams' Astonishing X-Men motion comic, and he did something so amazing with it. I was just like, "Wow!" I had read Cassidy, or is it Casada? What's his name? John Cassidy?
Cassidy.
John, it was, so Neil Adams, John Cassidy. So Neil Adams directed the Astonishing X-Men motion comic, which pretty much was the premier motion comic that everyone was waiting for. And it blew my mind because I read the book, but I didn't feel the moments that he made me feel. And that was the moment that in my head, because we've assembled a roster of directors, that we want to come on board for what we're doing with Justice for Hire. And I was like, Neil Adams has got to be one of them. This is amazing. I had no idea that he had this, and that's part of what his company does. They do animatics, so he already had the expertise going into motion comics. So yeah, motion comics in general, I think unless they're made, that's where voice comes in. That's where the visionary comes in. That's where the leader is. Like, if you're not the person that wrote the comic that guided every frame, and actually I put some materials together so you guys could see it, what I'm talking about. But there's Neil Adams, JFH art. But guiding the frame from script to any visualization to me is so important. So my personal process in comic books, but I also do this in film. So here's a Justice for Hire script, comic script, and then there's the photos. The comic scripts are broken down into panels, so you know what's happening with each panel. My father's a traditionally trained, writer. Like he loves letting the artist visualize what his writing is, and that's exciting to him. To me, that's not exciting. I know exactly what I want. I want to see it in a very particular way. So I take all these panels and then I get a bunch of cast members together and I shoot them. And I take photos, and then I put all the photos on a page to pre-visualize, for the artist and say, draw that. And then, the pencils is the first layer in comic book format, and everything else is built on top of it. Then you have the inks, then you have the colors, and this is the red guy is actually supposed to be Chinese, so that was miscoloration for this particular one. But yeah, and it's purposely there. This is part of the Knuckle Sandwich edition that shows a bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff. And even down to floor plans. Like, floor plans for comic books is really important. If you care about, seeing your vision through I look at comics as a development platform they're its own product, but for me, it's a development platform for other forms of media. So if you're the leader that's guiding all of that, and I really think that that's where media is going, is that you're going to have leaders, like very particular voices that are just guiding an experience through a transmedia ecosystem. So if you put in the time, you put in your own homework to say, hey man, I'm going to make sure that I reference everything in my frame, every texture, every piece of clothing. That way when I talk to a production designer, I know exactly what this character is wearing, and I can show them, and I know exactly where the camera's positioned. And then you start to get a sense of lenses. And like, okay, I know exactly what lens I want to shoot. I've already shot it before. I did it. So it's just like, how much preparation can you put into your world? And this is also all this development material. There's space here for gamified audience participation. How can you, like this floor plan, like where did Ivory drop his his jade medallion? Like stuff like that. Did you find the jade medallion? You can put it in reality. Start integrating, the ARG stuff. And there's a bunch of stuff to do here. But it all depends on what your vision is for the tone of the world and the story, and how all of that fits into the genre or fused genre that you're, fusion that you're particularly putting together. Did I answer that question? I went off.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Motion comics, like, they can be great, but most of them suck. Superman Red Sun is awesome. Neil Adams, astonishing.
There's a motion comic in it?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's awesome. It's awesome. They do some stuff in there that is I think is really important for cinema as research. It's pretty amazing.
Why do you think you lost all your friends?
Oh.
Shoot, your last year in film school.
A combination of things. I wasn't sensitive enough I wasn't sensitive enough as a leader to understand the needs of my team. I also wasn't sensitive enough to know who to choose and who not to choose, and who to have on set. Like, directors can be very competitive people. So when you have another director around, you should really know who that is. I mean, I knew who it was, and I'm not talking about even just directors, but in general, like when you have someone playing a role, if they can't sit in that position fully, then they shouldn't be in that position for you, at least in my experience. So I made some choices where I put people that could be very destructive and were very destructive in positions of influence. And I fortunately had a lot of my family helping out. So it was because of the family assistance that I had that helped me get together. We almost stopped shooting halfway through the shoot. And we got it all done because of the family support that I had. But just really challenging. So, and it's, I mean, even knowing your friends, because some people are very easily influenced. So if you have someone who's great at manipulating information, and then you have someone else who's very artistic but can be easily influenced, that can taint a relationship. So it's only within the last couple of weeks that I started reaching out to a handful, actually no, like one, maybe two people from that shoot, just to reconnect with them, because I've never expressed that. I wasn't in a place in life where I could actually have a grasp over my own feelings of how it made me feel at that point, to articulate, not necessarily for any particular outcome, but just to kind of get some closure on my side, rather than just putting it under a rug and just keep on going. And I think that's valuable at times too. But I think I found myself hiding behind the comic books at one point. I'm like, man, I grew up in comics, but this is part of an ecosystem. I can't just stay in comics. Like, what am I doing? So so that's my answer.
We have time for one more question. One more. You can raise your hand.
Well, I already asked the question, so somebody else wants to go.
I was curious when your comic books went international, did you just have them translated?
That's one of the next steps. We don't have any.
You said you were big in Chile at one point.
I have no idea how we're big in Chile. That's what I'm talking about. That's a huge weakness.
They're in English.
They're a weakness, yeah.
Okay.
I have absolutely no idea. I need to go and look at the analytics from our distributor that's pushing those numbers. But I have no idea how we've consistently broken to number one in multiple territories. I was talking to our choreographer last week, and he goes to Japan, and a bunch of the fighters already know who he is because he did these videos with us, and he's one of the characters in Justice for Hire. We've had maybe a $40,000 marketing spend over. I've run the company on like $50,000 a year for 13 years. Like, that's average. I basically live like a monk. I trained in the Shaolin Temple and was kicked out, but that's a totally different story. But yeah, so.
That sounds like a good episode.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We
Thank you guys.
really only have time for 2 or 3 pitches from the group. Who would like to volunteer? Who would like to go?
Let me just take this off so I don't record your pictures and give it to.
Yeah. 2 hands there. Third. Okay.
Streamed.